This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm your host, Ahval editor David Lepeska, and with me today is Erkan Saka, communications professor at Istanbul Bilgi University and author of the book Social Media and Politics in Turkey, published in English in November. Hello, Erkan, and thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
Turkey has often been ahead of the curve when it comes to the internet and internet use among the public, and this is perhaps best exemplified by Ekşi Sözlük, one of the world's first online compendiums. It was founded about a year and a half, I think, before Wikipedia, and with much more of a, let's say, cheeky character. Tell me a bit about it, if you would, and why it became so popular in Turkey after it was founded in 1999.
Well, I think it was one of the best examples of participatory culture that was, so promoted or in the emergence of internet, especially after emergence of social media. But even before the social media emerged, it was a good example of how participatory culture through internet could be achieved to some extent. And it was also, how can I say, most of the startups or initiatives just stop after a while, but Ekşi Sözlük was really resistant, not only political, but it just survived. And they had the founders are really nice people. They are digitally literate, not newcomers, but they were digital from the outset, digital natives in a way. So they could keep up the site, maintain the site. And if you have a space, then, users show up. The thing is, of course, Turkey has its own specifics. I really think if, mainstream media or traditional media could provide more voices to citizens, new media venues would not be that popular, but for all time, I observed the media was sort of traditional media was more elitistic or more narrow-minded. So many citizens who could not find a voice could just go to internet venues. And Ekşi Sözlük there seemed to be one of the best choices. That's how I can summarize.
One of the founders of Ekşi Sözlük fled to the U.S. after persistent online targeting, but as you say, the site continues today, and there have been several imitators and spin-offs like İnci Sözlük and İnci Caps. What do you the Ekşi Sözlük legacy today? It seems like younger people in Turkey online have shifted to more of a meme thing than this kind of intelligent discussion that was part of Ekşi Sözlük.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly sure about that conclusion. I mean, the thing is, Ekşi Sözlük itself changed. It used to be more like Wikipedia, as far as I remember, but now it has become a more discussion, debate, forum style, and you can still find more items of encyclopedia, maybe, but mostly it's a discussion place, and I'm not sure about the intelligibility level, but I'm not really criticizing. It's the new thing, and in the meantime, of course, with the new novelties in the media production on new media, yes, there are caps and others, so there are other venues. But for me, it is interesting that Ekşi Sözlük still survives, not only as a remaining or as a trace of old good days, but it's still good. I mean, it's still powerful enough. It's a part of the public debate. But there are other venues, and to some extent, I think they talk to each other. So you see a cap, maybe caps, a viral cap in İnci Caps, but then someone quotes it or refers it in Ekşi Sözlük so that you can also see it, or otherwise. So I think maybe the founders of all these clones or sites do not like each other much, but in the end, users are using them in a way intertextually. So in that sense, the venues just grow up. They don't really beat each other, but the venue for internet discussion in one way or another just increases, and it seems to be a good thing.
You say that Ekşi is today almost more of a place for discussion and debate.
Yeah.
Are people able to speak freely there, or do they face persecution if they criticize the Turkish government?
Yeah, of course, I think as a Turkish citizen from the outset, even before these days, you will know that, you should always act tactically, even on internet. I remember I always give this example in 1999, I think, when there was not much internet and we could have access to internet through internet cafes. I remember in a newspaper that the police raided an internet cafe to capture to arrest the user who was promoting some radical left ideas. So from the outset, I think Turkish users should be more tactical, and they know this. Of course, sometimes mistakes happen, and then we see the power of state again. I say this because yes, there is debate, and of course there are limitations, and Ekşi Sözlük is not really immune to these limitations. And in the old days, I mean not that old, like a few years ago, some young users realized that if they talk something about religion, this might be they might have some problems due to blasphemy laws or regulations. So, I mean, within the boundaries, there are debates going on. But what I admire is Sözlük writers mostly challenge or try to, test these limitations from time to time, and it still remains to be a very powerful debate venue. But otherwise, yes, I mean, the government's power, regulations, limitations can be seen there too. And in that sense, yes, within limitations, let's say, for the moment.
One thing that you highlight in the book is that even when the AKP was still widely seen as a democratizing force in its earlier years, it was already muzzling free speech online. You point to May 2011 when nearly 1 million people came out across Turkey to protest government internet filtering. Tell me a bit about that period.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that for many internet activists, or it's interesting to say even activists. Most of us did not even want to be activists at that time. Just the government forced us to be activists because of most, as far as I understand, most people will just like to play with their internet access, nothing much. But because of all these filtering or other requirements, limitations, people became sort of activists. And in that sense, all this narrative is challenged by, that AKP changed its style at some point, is sort of challenged by active or native internet users, because since it came to power at the internet front, AKP was always not very progressive. It always aimed to limit the discussion, limit the terms of public debate on internet. I guess the only thing they did not act that much was they were trying on several fronts. So mainstream media was bigger, and they worked on media to to make the media happen to turn into what we have at the moment, mass media or mainstream media. And now, since a few years ago, they could move easily to now internet communications. In that sense, that narrative can be challenged. But one by one, step by step, there was always an aim to limit internet communications. Sometimes even AKP is quite tactical, so they could even cooperate with main opposition at that time, using Atatürk as a pretext. That insulting Atatürk was also added, so that they could add all kinds of what do you call obscenity or similar items to restrict internet communications. That really helped to ban many sites. So at some point in the old days, even CHP is guilty for cooperating with AKP to limit internet. Yeah. And at that time, I mean, despite all, I should say that Turkey's internet user base was quite, I don't know, progressive at that time. So maybe because of that, they could see the heat early than other sections of society.
Some scholars and analysts believe that this May 2011 protest led directly to the Gezi moment, which you point to as a major turning point. And you highlight in the book several citizen journalist initiatives and the organizing power of social media. Tell me a bit about how the Gezi protests altered social media and online debate in Turkey.
Well, sometimes when we retrospectively look at it, we sometimes create this teleological understanding. Nobody was really on to 2011. Nobody was really planning a Gezi-like protest or anything. As I said, most of them were more interested in just more internet freedoms. But there are always unintentional consequences of social action, and there many people learn how to collaborate online, how to organize, and also I think many people for the first time realized that they were not really a small user base. It was huge. And as far as I observed, everyone who attended those internet freedom marches were surprised to see that there were so many people attending. And there, I think that sort of created an imaginary that, we are a big community. Yes, we are not like the old community types or social movements, but when we collaborate online, when we coordinate, this becomes a big thing.
Sort of the emergence of a new generation of protest.
Pardon me?
Sort of the emergence of a new generation of protesters.
Yes, exactly. Probably at that time also the older generations who were used to more traditional social protest types were also very much excited to see that something new happening, and maybe that's why they did not intervene that much when Gezi Park protests began. They did not try to use the old ways of protesting or collaboration or coordinating. So maybe 2011 helped future coordinations. I believe yes, there is a causal link there, but as I said, it wasn't exactly a very intentional one. When Gezi started, I think one thing that came to my mind until Gezi protest, I was in lectures, seminars. I was telling people that yes, there are all the means of participatory culture now, but unfortunately, we are not producing enough. We have the tools, we have all the advantages that old generations did not have, but we still use it like the old media type users. We are mostly passive users. But when Gezi started, I realized that, I think people are really participating and they are really producing. So they are not just passive audiences here. And we were, like talking about citizen journalism at that time, but it was mostly like an abstract or ideal type practice. But then at Gezi, I realized, it can really happen. It can materialize. So all these, I think for many people, Gezi showed that, social media could really part of a social fact. It was a social fact. It was a part of our daily lives in organizing protests, but not only protests, but it just became a daily life feature for not only for entertainment or for leisure time, but it was just essential part. I think that achieved this, and also I think it was as a tool. It also empowered civil society. That was another thing. It's not exact to civil society is another issue, not media issue. But I thought so civil society, the ones that had not really support from government or any other big establishments, could still generate a public debate, could still coordinate, and thanks to social media, it was more possible. And my trust or my faith in civil society emerged, or again, or renewed, let me say, at that time. I think they were both very together happening there, and that's what I want to say for the moment. Yeah.
The book mentions many sites that were born or blossomed after Gezi,
Yes.
P24 and Dokuz Haber and Adım Adım. It's now almost 7 years later. Which do you think have made the most lasting impression? Maybe Oy ve Ötesi? And I guess just more generally, did this kind of explosion of websites make the kind of impression people were hoping for, people were expecting?
Yes, I think many people who did not need to understand the nature of new media were expecting more, like emergence of a new political party or something like that that will structurally change society in near future. Maybe because of my academic background, or maybe some my interest in history, I never expected a very drastic change in near future. In fact, when there is a big riot or protest like Gezi, mostly conservatives win first. Only later, protesters become more, decision makers, and they begin to make a change. That's sort of my understanding of it. So, in that sense, I wasn't expecting much change in near future, but all these, now with this new empowerment that new media could be used, civil society had more confidence. I was expecting flourishing of these sites, and even more. I think it went well to some extent. Only what I was expecting the I wasn't expecting is that the coup attempt really made the country shift to a new position, and it's very hard to breathe for civil society. After coup attempt days, it wasn't a normal state, a normal country anymore. And in that sense, of course, your expectations, of civil society empowerment, social media usage, all had a stop in a way. So the big flourishing, blooming after Gezi was sort of stalled after the coup attempt. And as far as I understand, since the local elections last year, there is a new increase, a new hype, and now there are even more sites emerging or online collaborations with offline connections. So I think after this a few a 3 year hiatus or break, now the movement emerges and bigger grows again.
We,
Let me
we can
say,
get to
yeah.
the coup attempt in a minute, but first
Okay.
you said that it's usually conservatives that win after kind of protest movements like this.
Yeah.
Another thing that sprang from Gezi was the Turkish government's 6,000 strong Twitter army, reported by
Yeah.
the Wall Street Journal and others. Was this army real? When it was reported, I don't remember actually believing that were that many. And if it was real, what happened to it?
Yeah, just I'll just I was clear enough. I think just I didn't answer one of your questions that also all these new sites after Gezi, I think they had their own impact in several degrees. So I don't have the ability to calculate their quantitative impact, but I think they helped in their own ways. So we can talk about them later again, but yeah. So I think, and also it's important to see that not all projects survive that much, but even if they are temporary, they help creation of a new a team of users, and they can contribute their newly acquired skills to in other projects. And as far as I see, this is happening. Back to trolling or this army thing, I didn't believe too. I mean, so I think one of the things I'm very proud of was that I did a semi-ethnographic work on political trolling, and that's in the book. And despite all media hype, couldn't find out any organized army-like situation. Yes, there was trolling. There was many pro AKP media happenings, new media happenings, but these were mostly voluntary and or organized in small circles, but powerful circles. And interestingly, yes, they were sort of effective in after Gezi for a few years, but their effect mostly came through the fact that they cooperated with government authorities.
Wait, just to be clear, you it sounds like you're saying that you don't think there was this 6,000 strong Twitter army.
Yes.
Why was it so widely reported in such major publications? How did that idea get out there and become believed?
Well, I think it's better to believe that, I mean, it's like how can I say? It's a good title, headline, 6,000 army. And also, I think because of the Russian effect, and maybe because it became to be confused with, Russians impacting on American elections, and also this army. Yeah, I know. But this army type seems to be more media, how can I say, more clickable in a way. And maybe also it was when it was uttered by some government officials, it was to intimidate the oppositional users. But maybe they also intended to build that, but they could never build that. That's for sure. So, and in fact, I did try to locate all the, media coverage on that. None of the media coverage really gives you very substantive information about, where they are located, how they are happening. So most of the initial media coverages do not have factual information. There are mostly anecdotal, or they depend on rhetorics of the authorities. But in practice, as I said, of course, there were many people, users helping government discourse. But these were, based on many circles. And, one of those circles is now called, Pelican Gang. They emerged to be more stronger day by day now. But at that time, they were just one of the circles. And in fact, the most vocal political troll at that time, Taha Ün, changed sides. Now he's helping Ahmet Davutoğlu. And in fact, he after a few years, he was just dismissed. I mean, I don't know what happened inside, but like he was more pro Davutoğlu. And so when Davutoğlu lost power, he also lost power. And so there were also some people, some circles who were not exactly Islamist or who were not sharing AKP ideology, but they were more opportunistic, and they wanted to get a market share or whatever. And I believe some circles in İnci Caps or İnci Sözlük were like that. They had this media production power, all these caps skills, meme generation, and so they wanted to be part of it. I'm not sure to what extent they could really profit from that. But so there were many very heterogeneous state of affairs instead of one single army at that time.
And that's
for sure, yeah.
What's the state of pro-government trolling today? Is it less intense than in years past? And is it only in Turkish, or are there English language AKP trolls?
Yeah. They were. I think even after Gezi, they were also using some English or other foreign language, but mostly they were at that time focused on Turkish cases. But at the moment, this is not exactly. This is more speculation. But what I see is in the last couple of years, this heterogeneity, I claim, it disappeared. Now, most of the political trolling, pro-government political trolling, goes through the Pelican gang, and as some of them were dismissed, others or changed sides like Tahawun and others. I think their intensity also decreased. Yes, they are still mobilizing or creating some. They are creating some hashtag lynching or attacking journalists or others. But I feel like they lost the heat. It's in parallel to, I think, government situation. As the government is not as doesn't look as powerful as they used to, and their trolls are also losing power. And now, since they became a more homogeneous, I think they also lost this dynamic counter opposition rhetoric. They are most now they are commanded by a few people now. I can speculate, unlike the old days. So I think trolling is now less intimidating than before.
Well, yeah, it also seems like
yeah,
since last year's elections, in which the AKP did
yeah.
not very well, the AKP, the government doesn't, or perhaps does not believe in the Pelican Group's methods as much. It doubts them.
Yeah, I feel like, but at the same time, now the Pelican Group has more power in other circles. So, in fact, most of the impact of trolling comes through the fact that they always collaborate with the security forces or others. Like when they target you, it means that it's not only an online targeting. You might be arrested at some point if there are enough evidence or there's enough evidence or anything, or no need to evidence, just to intimidate. The police might show up, like all these trials, and the prosecutor's office just can send you some stuff. I don't know the technicalities, but the thing is, their power comes from that. So in other circles, maybe they are interested in other things like big, more profitable issues from energy industry or others. There are speculations about that. But in the meantime, I think, yes, they have some people. They are still targeting people, or they are trying to create some counter discourse. But yeah, I could say that they lost some of their impact now.
You recently said that the government used the failed coup as a pretext to put more pressure on social media users, and as a result, many people left Twitter to avoid persecution.
Yes.
But you think that maybe we've seen a return since last year's elections, that people are feeling more confident about expressing themselves online?
Yes, definitely. They are back. I mean, maybe it's not that much as it used to be during Gezi Park protests, but I can say that since last year, since the elections, yes, they are coming back, and some old users who were inactive now, they are active again. And there are newcomers, as many people grow up, and now there are younger users who also show up here. And the thing is, that surprises me. Of course, social media sites have different missions. Like probably everyone in Turkey now uses Instagram, but that's another thing. That doesn't mean usage of Instagram more than Twitter doesn't mean that Twitter lost its magic. When I ask people around, people still rely on Twitter. Even undergrad students, their first source to look at for news is Twitter. And this is important. I remember that Twitter lost its user base a few years ago, but it's now back. Every year, I just unscientifically ask students if they use Twitter, and now they are back. I mean, many of them are using. So, and that's, yes. After that, as I said, coup attempt days, a few years later, now I think there is a kind of normalization also in the social media usage. Yeah.
The book details how Turkey has blocked hundreds of thousands of web pages. But last month, it finally unblocked Wikipedia after 2.5 years, along the signs of what you were just saying. Should we take this as a sign that suppression of free speech online is in decline in Turkey?
I think government is that was a so shameful ban that I think at the end they decided that yeah, let's unblock that. Yes, the government, as far as I understand, is looking for new ties or connections with the Western countries or bloc again. So it might be a small sign, but the thing is, on a legal base, the site censorship continues, and Wikipedia was so explicit that they finally unblocked it. But I don't think that's a really big sign. I mean, we should see more of openings, and at the moment. We still see so many, hundreds of thousands of sites are still blocked, and every day we see a new blocking. And also, some of the sources of internet industry for small scale businesses or ordinary users are still blocked. From Uber to PayPal and others. We are always looking for alternatives, but normally, these are especially necessary for small-scale operations, initiatives. It's very hard to find a news source. If they want to pay you for advertising or something, if you do not use PayPal, it's hard to live. I mean, just it's an example of many other things. So I know that these are not only media censorship issues, that there are other roles like taxi lobby, interestingly, is very powerful in Turkey. I realize every day again and again. And so that there might be other issues, but the thing is, at the end, at the moment, yeah, it's a very little sign, but not necessary.
What are people on Turkish Twitter criticizing these days in terms of like the government actions? Kanal Istanbul, this Libya intervention. What's the latest hot talking drink now?
Well, Turkey, and it changes not day by day, but hour by hour. But I see that at least like Kanal Istanbul is an ongoing issue, and I think it has more legitimacy. I mean, Libya is a bit far away. I mean, I saw many criticism of it too, but Libya is not like a constant, constantly on the agenda. But Kanal Istanbul is like that, because it will also affect many, Istanbulians' life. And I can say that Twitter is still basically has an urban base. So many Istanbulites are already on Twitter, and they can show up. But the thing is, I think Twitter is acting like an surveillance over government policies or Turkish authorities. Like any items. Like today, I was reading about how education minister talked about like not everyone needs to go to university or something like that. So this was harshly criticized. And so day by day, hour by hour, Twitter users are a bit, how can I say, like a Damocles sword over authorities on Turkey. And so probably the authorities hate Twitter again.
Yeah, one chapter in the book is about fake news in Turkey.
Yeah.
Is there much of that? I mean, my thinking was that there's so much pro-government media in Turkey that there's hardly much need to fake the news.
Yeah, in fact, I argue that too. I mean, most of the fake news debates on the world does not exactly suits us because maybe because there the focus is on social media. But for us, the source of fake news is not social media at all. I mean, this is a big claim, I know, and not that totally true, but. As you say, some pro-government media is so liar, so producing fake news that we don't need social media at all. And social media is used to amplify this fake news production that happened on traditional media. And I think maybe in smaller scales now, for instance, maybe anti-vaccination stuff can be seen on social media more than the government media. And I can think of sometimes some anti-immigrant provocations, through fake news show up on social media first, and they need to be investigated more, I believe. But if you look at the recent history of Turkey, most of the most provocative and agitative stuff came through government media. Like, that I always give the example of Kabatash incident. That was a big incident. I think, Kabatash or also alcohol, usage in a mosque during Gezi. These will be used to instigate a communal strife in Turkey. I'm glad that this did not happen, but these things happened before, and these were used extensively by media and also authorities. As I always say, some of the major fake news producer newspapers, editors are always traveling with the president's plane, and as long as this happens, our focus on fake news will be, how can I say, our struggle against fake news will be limited, because the source of it has so much power to fight with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The hot new digital trend among Turkish youth is TikTok.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about who is using it and what are they doing with it?
Yeah, this is a new thing that after the book was published, this became a big issue. So I don't mention this maybe in new volumes or other things. I think one of the things, not only for Turkey but for also Turkey, I admire TikTok in that sense that it is the first social media platform that could have access to some user bases we did not see before. Twitter has a more urban or educated setting. Facebook is now enlarging around, growing around all generations, but still something was missing there. I think especially for the lower middle classes and beyond the urban centers, TikTok had this sympathy. So now we can see, we can observe a new cultural logic there, that new types of humor or new type of media production skills. In that sense, I admire. Honestly, I don't follow it much. Even for me, for a long time internet user, the jokes or humor there is very banal. But still, as I said, this doesn't. I shouldn't. My own taste should not interfere to the fact that this was a successful media platform. But I have some prejudices on another level. That's it's a Chinese origin website, so they are even more they are into censorship. And as far as I know, if there are any political content, they will immediately censor it.
Turkey will or China will?
I mean, through China. I mean, China is already used to this, and Chinese will collaborate with the Turkish authorities. I mean, I talked to some of the TikTok officials. In fact, they are definitely against any political content, and they are happy with Turkey at the moment. But I told them, if you were here during Gezi, you wouldn't be that happy. And probably, now that, other media venues are used for political criticism and all, TikTok seems to be very non-political. But the moment it is used for current events, Chinese are very happy to collaborate with the Turkish authorities, as far as I understand.
Well, you said something interesting recently. You said that TikTok is creating a new generation of skilled media producers, which
yes,
to me suggests that even if what they are doing right now on TikTok is not political, the skills they are gaining could, in the future, make a socio-political impact.
Definitely. So, in fact, this sort of happened in for through Ekşi Sözlük or İnci Caps or others. It is the same thing now. So that now all over the Turkey, now people are learning the very basics of video production, real time, and they have the narrative skills, tools. So it's a good thing, I think, in that sense.
Just last question for you. Last month, Reuters reported that cyber attacks targeting 30 organizations,
Yeah.
including government bodies in Greece and Cyprus, appeared to be the work of hackers working for the Turkish government. I wonder what you thought of this. Does Turkey have this sort of capability, and should Turkey's geopolitical foes fear attacks like this?
I haven't really looked at the attacks nature. So I will speculate here. If those attacks are sophisticated attacks, then I will say that as far as I know, Turkish state doesn't have that much of the level of sophistication. I suspect most of these attacks were more ordinary attacks, like basic what will we call that? Denial of service attacks, or basic hijacking of sites or accounts. These can be done by an organized group. And Turkey pro-government or pro-state hackers are always admired by Turkish authorities. They were sometimes given medals in the old days, that you can still find news about that. So as long as you are not critical of the state, you can have a good life as an hacker in Turkey. I don't know, or I did not see any direct evidence if Turkish state directly uses these hacker groups. But at least those hacker groups voluntarily helps. They always helped those targets who they seem to be anti-Turkey. So from time to time this happens. In fact, if you look at like in the last 2 decades, you will see at some points those let's say nationalist hackers attack those targets, anti-Turkey targets. So this was the last phase, let's say. They might get some help, but at least what I saw on the news or checked out some technology blogs and all, these were not that sophisticated attacks, not exactly data capturing or stuff. So it was a show of force, but it's not the very great threat as far as I know. Of course, you never know behind the doors, but until now, it's Syrian state has more organized hackers, or Iranians or Russians, but I never heard of Turkey has a organized hacker group. Like it's like the trolling case. It seems to be happening more voluntarily with the how can I say, sympathy of the government, let's say. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, just last week, Turkey opened its new cybersecurity center. So yeah, Turkey seems it's a little behind the curve on this.
Oh yeah. And Turkey likes to build big buildings, and that doesn't mean inside the building there will be a very sophisticated team of hackers or others yet. I mean, I know that Turkey is an old state with all the security apparatus, but technology-wise, I felt like Turkey is a bit behind the curve, as you said. So we will see. We will see.
Okay, Erkan Saka, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you too. Mm-hmm.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here, for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.